Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. So, coming back to Mathmech, and I did it, I caved, I put Heat Soul back into the list. I know I've talked a lot in the past about how, very recent weeks actually, about how I didn't think Heat Soul was necessary for the deck. I called it obsolete, which I think was kind of poor phrasing. I think optional would have been the better way to phrase it. Heat Soul, when I say obsolete too, I kind of also meant some of the combo lines, if they are fully realized, you know, you can go into Terahertz instead of Heat Soul, which I think it's pretty much always better to end on Terahertz than Heat Soul. And I will say this much, I have played maybe about a dozen games, which isn't a lot, but I've been giving Heat Soul an honest stab, and of course I'm going to be playing more games too, but I haven't yet found myself in a situation where I actually want to be summoning Heat Soul. But I do concede that it is not a bad option to have, even in a build like this, where, you know, we're not using microcoder or the Cynet conflict to make sure that we still have something to fall back on. Because I will say this much. There have been a couple of times, specifically when I get disrupted, where I've been playing Mathmech, and I thought, you know, Heat Soul actually would not be bad to have something to end on right now. So, in order to fit in that Heat Soul, I actually took out the second Alembertain, which I had two Alem in the extra deck for a while because my thought process was, okay, if they hit my Diameter for the Superfact, at least I have something to end on, and I have follow-up plays, right? But, you know, I thought about the times that I do that, it's like, it's so rare that actually will win you the duel, right? One, because if your Superfact is getting disrupted, I don't know, it's at that point you're either in so much trouble that you're gonna lose anyway, or like that kind of doesn't matter because you already have such a strong board anyway. So it's like, I figure the second Alem off the disrupted Superfactorial is not impactful enough to justify playing a second one in the extra deck. So I figured I would test it out for the time being. I don't think also I had Almiraj in previous builds. A couple of reasons I've included it. One, because we are playing Parallel Exceed, which I'll talk about in a second too. But actually, even if I wasn't playing Parallel Exceed, I think I would still want to be playing Almiraj because also in both the MCS and testing, I did have multiple situations where I found myself with an opening hand where I was like, oh, if I could like normal summon this like Veiler or something and link it off into a Cyberse monster and then use this other like addition I have in my hand, then I could find plays. But of course that also becomes a lot more relevant when you play Parallel Exceed as well, because then it just becomes like a crucial play as part of like your combo lines in order to use the Almiraj here. So I figured I'd go ahead and put the Almiraj back in. I think I took out, I don't remember what I took out for that one actually, but yeah, it wasn't the most relevant thing, whatever it was. I think it was like a extender or something, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so as far as the main deck goes, the main difference here is going to be Parallel Exceed. I think even if I wasn't playing Heat Soul, I would actually still want to try out the Parallel Exceed. A lot of the reason why I wasn't playing it before is because I didn't think it was necessary, which, to be fair, it's not. You can definitely do well playing Mathmech without this card, but I thought the extra body was maybe a little bit unnecessary. But again, I think I was thinking more about these cards in the scope of if you go off uninterrupted. Because yeah, if you go off uninterrupted, then there's quite a few things you don't need. But of course, duels don't go that way. So I also will say that I've kind of, in the past, I've thought of Parallel Exceed as a little bit situational, but I will say that it's actually not nearly as situational as I've given credit for. I think that also might have been because I wasn't playing Almiraj in the past when I have played Parallel Exceed, and, you know, if you're not playing Almiraj, then yeah, a hand like Veiler and Parallel Exceed and nothing else is dead, but if you are, then, again, you can normal summon the Veiler, link it off of the Almiraj, and then now you have a link zone to point to, as well as another Cyberse body to help you link off with. So as far as what has come out, it's been a lot of tech stuff. Speaking of tech stuff, I have swapped out like reboots and the Kurikara Divine Carnet and put in the Droll and Lockbird. Kurikara Divine Carnet and reboots, I guess, are more of a Labyrinth / Kashtira meta. Like early MCS, the first MCS of the season, right? That might have been a little bit more relevant, but here in this meta, if you look at all the decks that are doing well right now, right? Like we have Pearly, we have this deck, we have Vanquish Soul, we have Dragon Link. These decks all get wrecked by Droll and Lockbird. They absolutely get destroyed by the Droll and Lockbird. So this is a very, very, very good tech card right now. Would highly recommend slotting it into pretty much any deck you can, honestly, at this point in the meta. So, indeed, I have even prioritized Droll and Lockbird over maxing out Imperms and including a second Veiler, which initially I did have before. My first draft of this deck was pretty much this, but again, 2 Veiler, 3 Imperm. But I was like, you know, we can trim down on those a little bit and play the Droll and Lock here. Oh, and we also have Dotscaper once again. The reason I'm playing Dotscaper now and that I wasn't before was once again because of Parallel Exceed. If you open Parallel Exceed and Small World, you do need Dotscaper in order to be able to go into the Mathmech Circular here. Unfortunately, Gatchiri does not actually do it because they're both level 8, so they have 2 things in common, being Cyberse and level 8, so it doesn't actually work as a bridge. In that regard, you don't like super need the Gatchiri here. Dotscaper also fills that role as the bridge here, but it's not bad to have multiple bridge options, especially when your bridge cards are all playable in your deck. Gatchiri, I still think, is the most underrated Cyberse extender pretty much of all time. Being able to turn any of your cards into towers is pretty wild, although I do see more people on Gatchiri lately, so maybe it's not being quite as underestimated, but I think it's a very, very good card. Dotscaper, again, even though this is primarily used as a bridge, it still has multiple functions in this deck. You can send it off of the Dark Fluid to have an extra material and extend your plays even further. You can also just normal summon this thing, and Dotscaper by itself is a terahertz or an access code, right? So, yeah, definitely not a dead draw or anything. Okay, I think that covers everything as far as like the updates go. Oh, and also we're not playing Nabla anymore. I had Nabla in the past for the Defensor line, but the thing is, you only need Nabla with Firewall Defenser if you open Defensor and literally no other extenders, and in all my testing, I didn't have that happen a single time. There was not one time where I had to rely on Defensor and nothing else for combos. And like, even if that is the case, you can still pretty much do a full combo anyway. I think you just have to send a Diameter off of your first terahertz instead of like Desavewurm, but so yeah, we removed the dead draw of Nabla here, and I don't find that impacts the Firewall engine at all. I think it's completely fine, but let's go ahead and break this list down card by card. Let me take a sip of water before I do that. And then we will go ahead and see some games. So we're on 1 Effect Veiler, 2 Droll and Lockbird, 1 Dotscaper, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom, 1 Firewall Guardian, 1 Mathmech Sigma, 1 Mathmech Addition, 1 Mathmech Subtraction, 2 Mathmech Diameter, 3 Mathmech Circular, 3 Firewall Defenser, 3 Parallel Exceed, 1 Gatchiri Administer, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 3 Cynet Mining, 1 Mathmech Equation, 3 Small World, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and then 1 Mathmech Superfactorial. That's going to be our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Cyberse Desavewurm, 1 Primathmech Laplacian, 1 Primathmech Alembertain, 1 Mereologic Aggregator, 1 Salamangreat Almiraj, 1 Linguriboh, not Link, Linguriboh, 1 Link Decoder, 1 Update Jammer, 1 Splash Mage, 1 Golem Crystal Heart, 1 Transcode Talker, 1 Decode Talker Heat Soul, 1 Accesscode Talker, 1 Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid, and then 1 Firewall Dragon Singularity. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this list. Let's see some gameplay. Alright, our first opponent is going to be on Gatchiri. Looks like they are on an Auroradon build. I saw that in the O-Lion and all that fun extra stuff, so we're going to be taking the first turn here. And, yeah, I mean, obviously this is a very good opening hand. Got our Circular, got at least some amount of extenders, so we even have the Dotscaper in case like we don't end up like normal summoning here, so. They're going to Maxx in response to my Circular activation. We're sending Sigma, of course. Going to go ahead and use the Called By on the Maxx here. Obviously, don't want to have to deal with the Earth Insect. Anyway, minigame has been cleared. We can play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, so. Circular hits the board. Sigma's going to activate, of course, specialing itself. Activating Circular to grab ourselves the Superfact. And now we can overlay Circular and Sigma in order to go for the Alembertain. Gonna activate the effect, but the opponent's got another disrupt. They have the Ash Blossom for us this time, so this obviously poses a bit of a problem. We now only have 2 Mathmech monsters in the yard to go with our Superfact, but we'll worry about that in a moment. I'm gonna normal summon this Dotscaper and then just go in for the Splash Mage. Dotscaper's gonna go ahead and bring itself back here. Splash Mage will then activate to bring back the Circular. Gonna link off the Dotscaper in order to go for the Link Decoder here, should we? Yep. And of course now we can go into the Transcode Talker. Link Decoder will bring itself back. And Transcode's got the Splash Mage. We also have the Equation here. I'm actually going to use that instead of the Alembertain in this zone, because I'm going to end up going for the Singularity here. You'll also notice I'm not putting down the Gatchiri at Ignister to, well, you'll notice here in a moment, that I'm not doing that to make my Terahertz unaffected. The main reason I didn't want to do it here is because if I did it, I would have to awkwardly leave. Well, actually, I couldn't have done it here, and I'll explain why. Because my extender of choice there was Mathmech Equation. Like, I could have specialed the Gatchiri there, but the thing is, I needed the Equation in order to bring back the Alembertain, right, in order to be able to proc the Singularity. So, with that case, I had to bring back exactly Sigma and Circular for, like, my combo line, right? And if I want to set up the Superfactorial, I'm going to need both of them in the graveyard, so I can't leave either of these two on the field. So I'm going to have to use these three to go into the Terahertz. Now, I could have actually set up the Gatchiri to make the Terahertz unaffected if I had gone for something other than Singularity, but I also definitely don't mind just holding the Gatchiri and saving it for the follow-up turn to OTK with it if I need to, right? To make an Accesscode Talker that can't be affected and can attack twice with the Jammer and also blow up my opponent's field. So that's why I didn't use the Gatchiri here, was mainly those two reasons. It was mainly because, again, we had the Circular and Sigma on the field due to the way we set up that play. We needed to get them both in the graveyard, but now we can use the Terahertz to dump off the Diameter, which I want to say too, this is something that I don't see a lot of people doing. Like, I see this all the time on ladder, right? When I'm playing against Mathmech and I use Imperm or Ash Blossom on the Alembertain, which I think typically, not always of course, but typically is the best disruption point. You know, that'll cut them off from Diameter access. I'll see people who, after getting cut off here, will end up making the Terahertz anyway, right? It's not hard to do that. But then they'll just, like, dump off the Desavewurm, and then next turn, like, try to use the Aggregator, and I'm like, wait, what about your Superfactorial? You can definitely make that live by setting up a Diameter. So it's like, I don't know, maybe just a lot of people don't realize that, but I've seen that multiple times on ladder, where people, I'm playing against Mathmech, and somebody can do this, but they don't. So, PSA, if your Alembertain gets negated, and you can still make Terahertz, just dump off the Diameter, and then your Superfactorial is going to be live anyway. Here, I'm going to use the Mereologic Aggregator against the Nightmare Unicorn. Might seem weird to not just, like, flip up the Superfactorial, but here's the thing, right? If I just take out this Unicorn, my opponent could potentially just drop another one, or like a Fenrir or something from hand. But if I use the Aggregator, I can negate it, then that'll stop the extra deck rip as well as the spell search. This basically forces my opponent to have another extender in hand, otherwise their Unicorn is just going to be dead on board against what I have on board, so. This is how I like to use Disrupts a lot. Sorry, I keep pausing. This is how I like to use Disrupts a lot, is basically forcing my opponent to have the extra extender, right? Like cutting off searches, just making them have the plays they need in hand. Because obviously it's a lot harder to open exactly what you need in hand as opposed to like searching it or whatever, so. Here in response to Theosis, I'm going to flip up the Superfactorial. That way, Laplacian will be resolving after the Fenrir hits the field, after the Theosis has resolved. Then I can just slap a card in my opponent's hand to get rid of the Fenrir and not have to deal with it. And because I sent a card that the Singularity points to the graveyard, I get to bring back the Transcode here. If you get to proc this on your opponent's turn, I highly recommend bringing back the Transcode if you have the Terahertz set up, because you can put Transcode in this zone specifically, which will cause these two to be co-linked, and that will, of course, not only buff your Transcode a little bit, but also makes it so that the Transcode, and more importantly, the Terahertz, can no longer be targeted by card effects. Opponent's gonna battle. I'll bounce the Unicorn to save my monster. Why not? It's already used both of its effects, so it's like, there's no reason not to. Anyway, they have the Birth, but I get to just negate that with the Laplacian effect, so. And then, yeah, my opponent concedes, so. Yeah, Singularity, Terahertz, Superfactorial might not look like the most, you know, impressive inboard in terms of, like, number of cards. It's only 3 cards. It's not like a sprite deck or something where we fill our entire board. But, you know, in these very few cards, there's a lot of high-impact disruption there. Of course, not only the Superfactorial itself, but also the Terahertz offers some varied disruption. And the Singularity being able to bounce the opponent's stuff, as well as, of course, revive, like I said, the Transcode, to then make your Terahertz unable to be targeted by card effects. So, yeah, that was a pretty typical turn 1 Mathmech game. That's an ideal, I should say, that's an ideal turn 1 Mathmech game, where even though we did get disrupted, we were still able to end on our main combo line with very, very minor interruption. The only thing that changed, really the only thing that changed because of our Alembertain getting negated was that we set up Diameter in the graveyard instead of Desavewurm, which is still a negate anyway, you know, so it's like, it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, that's a pretty good game to start off with, I think. Let's go ahead and see the next one here. So I was about to be like, oh, here we have another Auroradon deck, this time it's Dinosaurs, but as I was looking at the list just now, I realized it was a Darkstrike Fighter FTK. It was actually an FTK that somebody in the Discord was just talking about recently, where the idea is you can pump a token up to level 43 and then sack it off with the Darkstrike Fighter to do lethal all at once here. But so we're going second against an FTK, which is a little bit scary, but we do have both Veiler and Imperm here. So opponent's going to Soul Eating Overraptor. I'm going to use Veiler here. I actually should have thought about using Imperm a little bit more here. Might have been a little bit of a misplay on my part because my opponent is about to put a token on my field, and the Imperm obviously have to have a clear field to use, but the Veiler, I kind of shotgunned fired it off just instinctually because, like, you know, my brain is like, oh, it's my opponent's turn, let's use Veiler and hold Imperm so that way we can, you know, so the Veiler doesn't end up dead in our hand or something. But here that actually ended up, even though I don't think this was correct, I should have used Imperm here. It ended up being okay because my opponent's going to throw a Callby in the same chain link. And because I still have nothing on my field, I can throw down Imperm on that, also that same chain link there, so. Yeah, like I said, that was like very close to not being okay. It's only because my opponent had a Callby that this ended up being the correct play, but in a blind vacuum, it was not correct to Veiler first. I should have used Imperm, which, I want to talk about this real quick. This is something that I don't hear a lot of people mention at all, but I think is a very important thing to discuss. Like, a lot of the time when somebody makes an incorrect play, but it ends up being okay, they kind of have this attitude of like, oh, well, I made the correct play because it ended up being the correct play. But I actually disagree with this notion. I think when evaluating whether a play was correct or incorrect, we should look at the information you had available to you at the time you were making the decision point. Because in the moment when you're making the decision, you're not going to know exactly what your opponent had. Now, obviously, if I knew my opponent had Callby, yeah, I would have thrown out Veiler and it would have been correct, but I didn't know that. And because, again, the token was about to hit my field, it was actually correct to use Imperm there, because I could have used Imperm to negate the Overraptor, and then potentially Veiler on a follow-up negate as well. You know, it would have been very easy for me to end up in a situation where I Veiler the Overraptor, but then they have another relevant monster effect, and I can't use Imperm because I have the token on the field. So I want to stop and talk about that for a second. When evaluating whether a play was or wasn't correct, I do think it is important to evaluate it from the perspective of being, just the perspective that you had in the moment. Again, this play was not correct. It ended up being correct, but it was not correct to make in the moment. But anyway, we got Cynet Mining for Circular. Circular by itself is an OTK line, so I'm just going to try to go for that here. Of course, my opponent has a face down card. I'm kind of expecting it to be like Callby or Imperm. It is being Droplet, just kind of like same difference. Well, Droplet's actually a little bit better for me because it means the Overraptor's not on the field. My opponent doesn't have as many. I mean, we would have battled over it anyway, but yeah, because we added the equation. This is also why I added the equation here and not the Superfactorial, is because I figured if my opponent had a Disruption as their back row, I would want to have an extender to be able to play through it, because we're not playing Link Spider. That's what I took out Almiraj for. Or took out for Almiraj, rather. I was trying to remember. We're not playing Link Spider in this build, so I can't link off this token for a Cyberse monster. Yeah, the Link Spider, like, in all the games, which I played quite a few games with Link Spider in my extra. In all the games I played, it only mattered once, so it's like, eh. I figured the Almiraj would be more impactful. Because there were, like I said, there was more than one time where I wanted Almiraj, but there was only exactly one game on ladder where I was like, oh my god, I'm so glad I have Link Spider, so. Also, we're not playing Multiplication. I didn't talk about this during the actual deck profile, but I can here. I'm not playing Mathmech Multiplication. I will say after not only this game, but at least one other that I can remember that I played in this play session, I'm kind of considering it. Being able to OTK off of Terahertz alone is a very valuable thing to be able to do. The thing is, I hate drawing multiplication. This was another thing I noticed in testing previously, where I had far more times where I drew multiplication and was sad about it than I had times where I actually sent multiplication off of terahertz and won the duel as a result. So that's why I've been taking multiplication out lately. I don't know, I might put it back in, but I really don't like playing that card, honestly. So yeah, the field spell doesn't do anything by itself, so the opponent is more or less in full top deck mode, and I think a regular dinosaur deck might have had one card lines. I don't know enough about dinos to know about that for certain, but I imagine with the field spell it would have been hard. But I think because they were a more specialized FTK deck, you know, obviously then you have a much more difficult time top decking exactly what you need to find the combo there. So let's go ahead and see our next duel here. All right, this time we have a duel against the mirror match, so it's going to be another Mathmech deck. This one is on a lot of the typical stuff I don't like that people play in Mathmech, like the Thunderstrike Kaiju, the Cynet Conflict, the Microcoder. I don't like any of those cards, honestly. I'm going to use Maxx here, as our opponent is taking the first turn, but they have an Ash Blossom, so looks like the minigame has been cleared, and we get to play a real game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Here. Got the Imperm, so I'm definitely keeping my eye on that. Opponent's going to lead with the Cynet Mining, sending the Sigma. It's definitely not too shabby there. Because now Circular gets to send off the Diameter. And now they have a full Superfactorial setup, which makes my Imperm here a lot less impactful. I'm not using Imperm on the Circular because, well, even if I did that, they could just overlay for Alembertain anyway, and then just add the Superfactorial that way. So I figured I'd just let them have that off the Circular, and then I'll use Imperm on Alem anyway to stop a Diameter search, and hopefully the Superfactorial is going to be the only thing I have to deal with here. I'm crossing my fingers for that, but no, my opponent has Small World, so they just have access to Diameter anyway. Opponent had a great hand for playing through just about any kind of disruption here, honestly, with the Ash Blossom for the C, and then just, yeah, the follow-up here. Yes, going for Splash Mage. Splash Mage is going to bring back the second Diameter there. Linking one of them off for, of course, the Link Decoder. So I am going to have to play through the terahertz and the Superfact. I have a decent hand, though, so, like, I might be able to do that here. Yeah, Link Decoder brings itself back. Transcode Talker is going to bring back the Splash Mage. And then those two are going to get linked off for the terahertz here. Now, they could use terahertz to send the Dotscaper to make the, what is it called, Heat Soul here if they wanted to, but they elected to send Desavewurm anyway. And this is like kind of the epitome of like why I think Heat Soul is very optional. Like, because my opponent's list does run the Heat Soul. They're on all that kind of stuff here. But the thing is, like, in the moment, yeah, you would rather have the spell Trap Negate than more draws, which has kind of been my whole point about Heat Soul anyway. In any situation where you can combo off and you're not getting interrupted, and you can set stuff up, you're pretty much always going to set up guaranteed negates over draws that may or may not result in drawing a disruption, you know, so. But anyway, we top deck Circular because we're the greatest player ever, but it might not be enough here. We're going to have to see. They're going to use the Superfact in response to the Circular activation. Good timing. It'll allow the Laplacian to hit the board right when the Circular does, allowing them to send it, and then they'll also have the Omni negate up. Of course, we do also have to be concerned about the terahertz sending aggregator as well. Desavewurm actually ends up being irrelevant here because of our exact hand, thankfully, but them hitting the Parallel Exceed was also pretty brutal. I very much wanted to keep that card in particular, but I guess between that and Dotscaper, we do have options, so anyway, I'm going to go for the Alembertain here. Like I said, I'm really trying to force out another negate here more than anything else. Because, like, yeah, I don't have much to add. I'm going to add a Subtraction because I don't want to add Equation because of the Desavewurm. So here I'm just like, oh, come on, just use your Aggregator already. So I'm going to go for Splash Mage, and here's the terahertz, now sending the Aggregator. Alright, so I'm going to normal summon Dotscaper. Dotscaper, I'll go ahead and link that off for the Link Decoder. Now Dotscaper gets to bring itself back. Splash Mage. Oh, they still have the Diameter negate on the Laplacian. That's right. I knew they had another one. I thought I was in the clear, but no, I'm not. Alright, Link Decoder is going to bring itself back. Transcode will attempt to bring back Splash Mage, but ultimately not going to happen. So I will say, this is another game. Well, actually, let me advance a little bit, and then I'll talk about this. So as you can see, I end up linking off for Accesscode Talker, but this is very much another game where having multiplication would have actually saved me here. I could have just sent multiplication for the terahertz, right? And then I could have just battled for lethal, right? It would have been very easy, but I don't have that option here. And the other thing is, too, I can't really go for terahertz here anyway, because, like, yeah, I could terahertz and send something with a different attribute and, like, battle over these two, but that's not lethal. I don't think, right? The terahertz would be at 55. This would be 4,400 damage. This would be 3,500. I'm actually literally 100 short with terahertz here. If I summon terahertz and battle into these two. Because, yeah, 55 minus 11 is 44. This is 35. 44 plus 35 is 79. I'd literally be 100 off, so it's so painful. This is the other game that really made me want to consider multiplication, but I'm going to use Accesscode Talker here to pop the terahertz. Oh, I misplay here as well. I totally forgot about Laplacian's destruction protection. It's not really, it's a very minor misplay, honestly. Not like well, it might matter, honestly, if I try to go for the G Golem, but yeah, here we're just going to put our opponent in top deck mode. I don't think there's much else we could have done there. And they actually end up ripping the Dotscaper, just like the best possible card they could have. So between Dotscaper and Sigma, like, that was enough. I knew they could OTK. Like, because they send Dotscaper for the Linguriboh. Dotscaper brings itself back. Then you can just make Update Jammer. Actually, I don't know, though. Hang on. Well, our opponent has the G Golem still, right? I think they could have found lethal. That was actually an early concede for me. I will actually freely admit that was an early concede. Normally, I like to make my opponent play it out, and I really should have there. Because they might have actually not been able to find lethal that turn. I don't know, but in any case, that was, again, another game that I wanted to point out where multiplication would have been useful. And does make me want to consider adding it, but again, just drawing it is the worst. But anyway, we have one more duel to show. Let's go ahead and go straight into that here. And our final duel is against Subterra Guru Control. I threw very heavy quotes around that, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. It's funny, like Yumi, quote-unquote, control. I feel like Subterra Guru duelists just need to acknowledge their deck is a stun deck already. So, anyway, they're going to set a monster in set 3. Our hand is phenomenal. Oh my god, our hand is ridiculous, actually. It's like literally all the gas in the world. So, I'm going to Circular send to Sigma. We'll add the equation this way. I'm going to link off the Circular in this case for the Linguriboh. I'm going to try to keep this up. We have enough gas in our hand that I'm pretty sure I can keep this up for like the whole turn. So, Pluto's going to try to flip Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. But unfortunately, that actually does nothing. It actually literally does nothing at all against this deck. Not even against the Parallel Exceed like my opponent thought, because it changes itself to level 4 as it's hitting the field. Get to use Laplacian here. The reason I'm going for Laplacian in this case specifically is, again, because I have so much gas in my hand. I get to not only pick off the card in my opponent's hand in case it's a Disruption card, which it is, it's Ash Blossom, but I get to hit one of the back rows as well. I wasn't even really thinking about the face-down monster here. I kind of totally forgot Subterra Guru was a thing, but it ends up being another Ash Blossom anyway, so. Oh, there are Runic version too, I forgot about that, yeah. Sniping the Flashy Fire also definitely not too bad. Alright, gonna summon the Firewall Defenser and go for the Splash Mage now here. And my opponent's just gonna concede. This is a very quick duel, but if you're wondering how the rest of this combo line would have played out, I would have used Defensor and Splash Mage to go for Transcode Talker, then Special Summon Subtraction, then Link for Update Jammer, then go for Accesscode, and that's how I would have OTK'd here while still keeping the Linguriboh up as well. So, this replay was more just, well, I guess to be fair, we got to talk about playing through a bunch of back row and all that fun stuff, but this is mostly a point and laugh at the stun player game, so, but yeah, in any case, it's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching these duels. Super appreciated as always. Let's go ahead and move now to our outro. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching it all the way to the very end. That means a whole lot to me, and it's also a fantastic way to support the channel. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in other ways besides YouTube, there are plenty of ways to do that. If you check out the description below, you'll find a bunch of links down there. One of them goes to my Patreon. You're actually seeing the names of everyone subscribed to the Patreon on the screen right now. So if you're interested in getting your name in the credits here at the end, if you want to see more daily Master Duel content, or if you're interested in one-on-one private coaching sessions, I offer all of that on Patreon. I also stream live on Twitch. Feel free to go ahead and click that link and follow and or subscribe there. I also have the Discord community, if you want to follow that link, where hundreds of duelists have already signed up. Free to join, and you can just come hang out, talk about the game, and chill in general. Final link that's going to be in the description is my Twitter. You can follow that if you want some more notifications of what's happening with the channel. So, all in all, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.